Military sexual trauma is an experience, not a diagnosis or a condition, and people react in a variety of ways that has a direct impact on the relationships we have with friends, extended family, intimate partners, and children. MST does not discriminate. People of all genders, ages, sexual orientations, racial and ethnic backgrounds, and branches of service have experienced this trauma. I'm Ashley Rebekka, and I'm a survivor of military sexual trauma. Because this is such a deeply personal issue to me, I've returned to host this special American Legion Tango Lima podcast series. As the American Legion shines a light on veteran suicide, we would be remiss if we did not discuss military sexual trauma, which we know is a pervasive problem with lasting effects on the mental health of survivors' family and community. In this series, be aware, we will be discussing topics that are sensitive and potentially triggering. So take a pause and take a break as needed. Join me as we explore the ramifications of MST, share the stories of resilience, and identify resources and tools for those in need of assistance. Together, we will celebrate triumph and tragedy. Today in our series, we explore military sexual trauma in the LGBTQ plus community. Our guests, Lindsay Church, founder and executive director of Minority Veterans of America, and Rebekka Eshler, president of Transgender American Veterans Association, are joining us. Lindsay, Rebekka, welcome to the Tango Lima podcast. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. I know, Rebekka, you're in Alaska, right?
Oh, yeah.
We were talking a little bit about the Northern Lights. I'm feeling very inspired. Like, I got to get out there and check it out. And Lindsay, you're in Virginia, correct?
I am. I'm in the currently hazy state of city of Richmond, Virginia, but
yeah, the world is wild right now. So despite what's going on in the sky, right, we're going to turn the lens over and, if you will, this kaleidoscope of awesomeness that is life. So we'll get started. So as you know, we've been talking about military sexual trauma, and we'd be remiss to not dive into the LGBTQ plus community and how this issue impacts veterans across the space and a niche group of folks. So what I'd like to do is I want to dive a little bit more about both of your experiences, how you've gotten into being representation for these amazing organizations, and some of the things that you've seen in the organization and how we can collectively move in a positive direction together. So I'll throw it over to Rebekka first. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got involved with Transgender American Veterans Association.
Thank you. A little bit about me. I am in Alaska, obviously, and I work as an EMT and ER tech. And how I got into TAVA was I felt like I needed to do more in the community. I realized that there wasn't much happening, and our previous president, Ann Murdoch, posted on, I joined the TAVA's web page, and she posted something, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a leap. I'm going to do this. And especially because like after Trump and all the other politicalness of this, I was like, I got to be a voice. I can't just be hidden anymore. I got to get out and be in the open. So I signed up with her, I got into it, and now it blossomed into this craziness that we call today. Ooh, and my AirPods are gonna die. But it's been fun, and I'm excited because we get to be a voice for the not just trans veterans, but all veterans, and making a true difference.
Rebekka, could you tell me a little bit more about the mission of your organization? Right, I'm checking out the website, to provide comprehensive care and support for transgender and gender minority veterans, their families and allies. Tell us a little bit about more of what services and things that you provide for the audience.
So TAVA's main mission right now biggest thing is making sure that we're a voice for transgender veterans and pushing for making sure that the healthcare that transgender veterans get is the same across all VAs. And really all veteran care is the same for all VAs, because we all know that you go to one VA, it's going to be different than another VA, and it shouldn't be. We are very much being advocates and making sure for legislative policies and anything that's coming out for transgender veterans and transgender individuals. We're trying to be that lead partner. And our biggest things that we have right now is our support groups. We have a her TAVA, their TAVA, his TAVA, and then our TAVA, which is just a support group that is ran by transgender individuals that gives them a space where you can be yourself and talk about issues that are really happening. I know we've had a few great mentions in our his TAVA about sexual trauma that people have experienced, and trying to give them a safe spot that they can feel safe to be talking and out in the open. We're also collecting transgender veteran stories. For the Smithsonian has asked us to start collecting stories and making sure that our history can never be erased. And that's another big mission that we're taking on. And then our great partnerships with all the other VSOs and LGBT organizations trying to get this real change passed is another great thing we're trying to be doing.
That sounds fantastic. What an exciting opportunity, the Smithsonian and collecting stories. And it is so important that everyone's voice is heard. I echo that sentiment.
It was crazy when we were back in August. We got to go back into the back of Smithsonian and see the original transgender flag, and it was right next to all the 9/11 memorial they had.
Wow,
and it was just like craziness.
that is amazing. I've heard. It's on my bucket list. I'm a super nerd, so if I ever got an invite to go back there, oh, I don't know.
Well,
they'd have to drag me out.
When we come back in town, let me know. I have a contact.
Okay. All right. Okay. I see you. I like that. I'm all about it. So Lindsay, I'll throw it over to your corner. Tell me a little bit about Minority Veterans of America, how you got started, where we are now.
Yeah. I a little bit step back before Minority Vets. I'm Lindsay. I use they them pronouns. I'm a trans, queer, non-binary veteran. I served in the Navy. My mom, my grandfather, and like a lot of my family served in the military, so I was third generation. I served from 2008 to 2012. I came out in 2003. I was set to join the military actually in 2013. Or into about 2003, excuse me, right after I graduated high school. But I came out and figured out that I was queer at that point and decided that I didn't want to serve under Don't Ask, Don't Tell before I could figure out who I was. I spent a couple of years figuring out who I was. I actually was a drag king leading up into the time that I actually served in the military. So I like to say that I went from being like as out as you can be to as closeted as you can be when I joined the military in 2008. So I spent 4 years, almost all of my time was served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I celebrated the last 3 months of my service on terminal leave. When the policy had been struck down, which was pretty cool. But most of my time was spent hiding who I was, sacrificing my personal life and every part of my expression of who I was to serve in the military, because I believed that at the time, service to my country was more important than what I was experiencing as a human being. When I got out of the military, I was medically retired. I had had a series of really bad surgeries. Thank you to the Ferris Doctrine. I can't sue the military for any type of medical malpractice. I've had 11 surgeries on my sternum, spine, and back. I actually just got surgery on Monday, so I'm a little bit loopy and not as sharp as normal. That would be why I've had 2 surgeries in a month. So I live with the lasting effects of my military service. I was medically retired in 2012. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was supposed to be in the military for 6 years. I was only in for 4. I was a linguist returning to Seattle, Washington, trying to figure out what in the heck I was going to do. Thank goodness my mom was a veteran. She was able to help me really figure out some things, navigate the VA, and figure out like, how do I get my benefits? I was part of a transition pilot program where they gave you your VA rating and your disability rating with the military at the same time. So I was one of the first folks to get their VA rating at discharge. So I was really fortunate in a lot of ways. I was set up for success in many ways, but I was also really I struggled with who I was. Like when I got out of the military, I felt like there were 2 parts of me. One part that was the military part of myself, the like, hoorah, patriotic, like I love my country. And then there was the other part of me that was like, I'm a queer. I'm beginning to figure out that I'm trans. I didn't have words for it yet, but I have always looked like this, felt like this, trying to figure out who I was. The military had really stunted my ability to become who I was. And so I was really figuring out, when I do training now, I always talk about there's like a fracture in the minds, in our own minds, as queer service members that lived in their Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or the subsequent trans man, is that we have two parts of ourselves, and it's almost like we have a fracture in our identity, so we can't quite put them back together. Folks in the veteran community who are LGBTQ have a higher rate of divorce. I'm divorced. I tried to have keep my first marriage together like as hard as I could. I was holding on as tight as I could, but I couldn't put all these pieces back together and become who I was. I've been out for a decade now, and it's finally taken about a decade to really get back all these pieces and figure out that I can be queer, I can be a veteran, all in the same space. In 2012, I got into the University of Washington. Thank goodness. I have literally no idea how I even got in. I typed my essay in the box. Still have no idea what I said to get in, but they let me into the University of Washington. I did my undergrad, really struggling to figure out who I was, how I was going to engage in the world. I did my paperwork to get my GI Bill stuff signed, but I didn't get connected to the community until I was graduating with my undergrad, getting ready to get my master's degree. And I was like, I can't do this alone. And so I actually started working for the Student Veteran Center at the time, which only did benefit certification, which if you all went to college, you know that that only gives you money. It doesn't give you any of the social support that you need to integrate back into campus, to integrate back into regular life. It's here's your money, here's your paycheck, get out of my face. And the university is you can see it, the universities gain tuition money and you're getting your payments, but you're frustrated. So we actually piloted and pitched a university department that would actually serve everything else with the financial needs. And so there is a department on the campus of the University of Washington that still stands and serves about 3,000 students a year. That was founded in 2015 as a result of a couple of student veterans that were pretty mad about what's going on campus. And so I tried to fit into the traditional community, and it was really hard. Looking like me, acting like I do, believing the things that I did, oftentimes it was really hard for me to find a home in the veteran community. Even though I had done all this work to create all these spaces for people, I was still outside of it. I could be a veteran here, but I couldn't be queer. It was not okay. Go, there's another center for you somewhere else. You can go do something else and somewhere else. And that's all well and good, but we're more than one thing. We're many more things than just veterans. And so I was working with the Student Veterans of America organization and it didn't work. I was a volunteer at the Post 40 American Legion in Seattle, Washington. I quickly rose to the ranks of post commander because I was young. I knew how to find other veterans. I brought in lots of new members. I was people were asking me how to get new members. How do we come be my membership chair? And I really struggled because in 2016, the values weren't exactly progressive. People wanted us to watch the debates, and I literally couldn't. The 2016 election, they wanted us all to get together for the debates, and I was like, absolutely not. I don't think that's healthy for any of us. And it became a really tense and a lot of animosity being bred. So I really struggled to lead this post while I was also feeling a lot of these feelings about who I was as a person, as a queer person, as a person who identified as a woman at that time, somebody who was young, somebody who was white in Seattle. There was a very white community, and I watched the American Legion to really struggle with bringing new members who are younger, women being hit on, people really being left out and made to feel other. And so I actually just ended up getting really mad one night and talking with one of my dear friends. And I was like, I hate that we don't belong in this community. And I hate that we don't have a place. My friend, Catherine Pratt, is a Korean American woman veteran, and she also felt similar feelings. And so we said, I don't understand what it feels like to live in your body and your experience, but I do understand what it feels like to live in this community and not have a place. And to not have a space to call home and not to have a connection to the community. And so we actually started Minority Vets via text message, the two of us. We said, I think there's something here. I think there's a community that comes together that fights for each other in these moments, because 2016, 2017 wasn't exactly the shining moment of our lives and the rights that we existed under. And so we came together and said, when one of us is harmed, we're all harmed. And when one of us needs community, we're going to build that together. And that this place is not going to be perfect. There's never going to be a perfect union and harmony. It's going to be constant work, but we're going to work together. We're going to create an organization that works to create community belonging among all of us, to create this space that we can belong and thrive in, and to create this systemic change that will create the equity that we need to be able to thrive and be a part of the long-term like vision of what our community should be. So we've been around since 2017. We started 12 days after the trans ban. I knew what was coming at that point. I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and watching the trans ban come in, I was like, well, this is a new version of the same policy. So we came together and we've been fighting ever since. And started working on military sexual trauma policy. I'm kind of doing it a little bit all along, but the big height of when we came into it was around Vanessa Guillen's murder. When Vanessa Guillen was murdered, we came together as a grassroots coalition of organizations and organizers to fight for an end to military sexual trauma. I can tell you we're about 30, 40 years from that, but we are still working on it. We've been working since then. We are now working on systemic change around military sexual trauma and ensuring that veterans and service members have access to reproductive rights, because military sexual trauma comes with a unique set of needs, some of them being reproductive health needs. So that's the longest story I have for you, but that's how I got here.
Inspiring, awestruck. It's incredible the amount of both perseverance and passion that you have, Lindsay. I've watched you from afar for a while, and it's always amazing to just watch people grow and become their true authentic self. Like when that shines through, and I've never seen you shine so bright as you have just sharing that story, because your experience is unique, but also there are bits and pieces that people can relate to. And I think in the veteran community, particularly in the LGBTQ plus community and those that are allies that are supportive, your story matters. And that is what helps people become more aware, self-aware of themselves. And just, wow. Just take a pause. Like, I want Jarek, our producer, to just like put applause. Jarek really put applause.
Thank you. That means a lot. Honestly, we're all just humans. This community is just built with a bunch of humans trying to figure out how to be and show up for each other and how to fight for each other and do the right thing and right by not just us, but the American people that we genuinely serve and care for. So you're all just humans, and thank you for that honestly, this is my true and authentic self, and it's the closest I've ever been, but it's also, I don't care about anything else. Like, I want the world to change for everybody else. And so yeah, just thank you.
I gotta focus. I was like, I have questions, and now I'm emotional, but I'm very happy for you. I'm very, very happy. Okay. So with both intros and additional background as to how you both have profoundly gotten into a position for impact and change, in this series, we're talking about military sexual trauma, and we understand that advocacy is critical in this space. And I want to just dive a little bit more deeper into any statistics or numbers, right? Any data that either of you can provide about the LGBTQ plus community and MST in its relation and access to services. We touched on it just very briefly with Lindsay there at the end. But I think it's really important for all of our listeners to understand that there are some unique challenges, but the overarching theme is, how do we get the access to MST related services, whether it's at the VA, through nonprofits, through other support and advocacy groups. So I will turn it over to whomever wants to kind of kick that off.
So two things. I don't have the specific data because I didn't bring that all with But two groups that have a higher likelihood are, one, separating these two groups. One, we're talking about gender identity, and we're talking about sexual orientation, right? That people often say like LGBTQ plus two, like all of these things, but there's two things that are indicators for a higher likelihood of sexual assault and sexual violence. One being a sexual minority, so identifying as a lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, or open. This is where gay men or gay and bisexual men are more likely to be assaulted than heterosexual men. And so you're looking, some of like the understanding of why this happens is that military sexual or like sexual violence is not about sexual gratification, it's about power dynamics. So when you think about military members who are most vulnerable, you're looking at vulnerable populations. So sexual orientation and gender identity, gender minority status within either one of these is going to increase your likelihood. So LGBT service members are more likely, I think it's like 2 or 3 times more likely, and transgender service members have a really high rate of sexual violence, especially trans women. And so when we talk about those two groups, those two things are have a higher indicator, but also that when you look at support services, we are just now starting to get to a place where these support services have any type of culturally informed lens, right? That like we are so far behind when we think about LGBTQ health centers. When you talk about anything having to do with an LGBTQ health center, nobody's even heard of it in the military community. When we talk about it in the VA, same thing. These are like brand new ideas, but when you think about sexual violence and LGBTQ survivors, you need somebody to have cultural competency around how to support that survivor, how to collect a rape kit, how to make sure that you have provided all of the contraceptives necessary, making sure that you've done anything that has like pap smears, things like that. You're looking at the cultural needs that don't necessarily match within the military community. And so those types of services are just now starting to be understood, and military and veteran community are starting to stand them up. But I'll let Rebekka, sorry, I've been talking for a bit, let you jump in there for any of this.
1 second. But yeah, for sure. For transgender is super high. I know just talking to my own members, it's very common theme of sexual trauma has happened to them while in service, and they didn't know where to go. I mean, that's the biggest thing is a lot of them go unreported. I know 6 off the top of my hand that were not reported, that they got basically, okay, here's a medical retire for what you went through, but we don't want you to report it. And even out in the community now, when to even offset to go be able to talk about your trauma, there's not that much out there. I will say for in the transgender community, it's hard because one, you have to deal with all the other issues that you have from PTSD, from your gender dysphoria, and then to put on military sexual trauma on top of that, there's not many people that knows how to handle all 3 of them, or can be able to handle all 3 of them without getting the right kind of resources. I'm not really great with data, I won't lie. Data's not my strong point, but I know that it's a struggle. That's why we had to have had these different support groups and being so successful so now, because I know one of our members, like, I've been to 5 different therapists, I've been to 5 different nonprofit groups, but they didn't understand the transgenderness side of me or my veteran side of me. They were they couldn't talk about all of it together, and it's really hard.
So when we talk about the context, right? So as you said, Rebekka, you felt like you could not have those same conversations with the same person, right? So the cultural competency, and I'm curious as to what is the cultural competency best practice, and how can folks who may not have connection either to the veteran community or LGBTQ plus community, or both, right? Like how do we educate and advocate folks who otherwise don't know how to just, I'm trying to think of the correct word, but like if we have all of these core competencies, right, of like how we want to be treated, right, like treat others as those that you would want to be treated, right? what kind of curriculum, or like what are the best practices that are out there, or are they still kind of being put together? Maybe Lindsay, you might have some thoughts on this as well. I'm just curious as to like what's the gold standard for folks who are having a hard time finding just one person to talk to about all of these intersections of both, gender identification and gender orientation. I hope I said that correctly.
Yeah.
You did.
I did. Okay.
I want to start off with saying that as the gender identity, we're almost less likely to even go to a hospital or mental health providers because of the trust issues, not being misgendered or even getting dead named. It's less likely that even we will seek out that kind of help. So that's number one, is educating the staff to the practices of making sure that the charts, that they have their preferred name, and that's what you're going to be calling out instead of whatever their legal name is at the time that they don't want to be called, or using the right pronouns, because that first battle is making sure that they feel safe enough to be even in that space. Secondly, we're still trying to build this curriculum because honestly, it's not talked about enough in the community. I mean, let's face it, any kind of sexual trauma, sexual assault is a taboo topic almost. And it's such a weird thing to say. I mean, I can say this past Tuesday, I got sexually assaulted at my work, and I didn't know how to talk about it because I didn't want to feel like a victim. I'm a nurse. I work in the ER, and how am I supposed to explain? Like, it's kind of like people put as a norm, as it's something that happens and you just move on from it. So that's something we just gotta figure out how to make it more of a culturally accepted to actually talk about this subject and bring it up. That's why I'm thankful for this podcast, because it's bringing it out into the culture. I don't know if Lindsay wanna.
I just say, Rebekka, before Lindsay goes on, I just want to say thank you for sharing that. I know that that's not easy, and it's unfortunate that that is an experience that is either frequently happening, or as you've gone and through the healing journey, and
Yeah,
that's a lot. I do appreciate you sharing that. I just want to interject there.
it was rough. I mean, I didn't even press charges till 2 days later. I pressed charges finally yesterday, after I could even sort it out in my own head. So it's a rough journey.
Well, I appreciate your strength in sharing that. It's not easy. It's not. I validate your experience. It's thank you.
Thanks. Now I'm gonna cry.
That's okay. I'm particularly emotional, and I'm here. If everyone wants to do a good cry session after this, I'm here for it. So I see Lindsay kind of giggling there. But we could go on.
So I have a couple. So I do trainings, and I think that training is so important. One of the things is like people are actually starting to do them, and I'm really excited to see them. And it's more than just like us. It's like seeing other people that actually specialize in this. They're starting to specialize in it, thank goodness. So there are trainings available, especially through DVAs. We do training through the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm doing one later this month on preventing LGBTQ veteran suicide. It's the 2-hour workshop. Please start seeking these trainings out, because they do unpack things. It's not for anything other than making your services better. Like, I know that there's all sorts of misunderstandings about who people are. I think just show up to the trainings, learn more about our stories, hear what we need, and really just figure out how to create a space that works for people. And so when I do training, I kind of bucket these things out. And so like when thinking as an organization about how to create LGBTQ supportive services, the first and foremost is creating facility safety. To Rebekka's point, like you can't there's so much mistrust that when I think about the journey of a veteran, it takes so much for an LGBTQ veteran to engage with any VSO or VA services. So if you are engaging with a veteran that's LGBTQ and they're there for the first time, you are the first experience and you could be the last. And so really thinking about how does this person experience experience your organization or your work or your services through the lens from beginning to end, right? So I think about facility safety a lot because I'm non-binary. I can't find a bathroom to save my life and oftentimes end up in the women's restroom. I have been harassed and chased into a bathroom by a staff member while going to the bathroom. They had a VA facility. It has happened, and literally, like, this happens regularly. There's videos on TikTok. You can look at people literally being harassed for walking around the facility. It is a thing. Facility safety is so important when you don't think about, like, anytime I leave the house, I have to think about whether or not I can go to the bathroom. Am I going to find a place that's safe enough for me to use the restroom for the next 3 hours? I have to go to the doctor this afternoon. I have to think about, I'm going to be misgendered the whole time. They're going to call me miss. They're going to call me ma'am. They're going to call me she. They're going to do all the things. I've asked them to just call me Lindsay. They will not listen to me. I've accepted that. But if I have to go to the bathroom, I'm going to be in trouble because if I can't find one in the facility, I can't use that facility and I just don't go back. So think about facility safety. Is it safe for a person to exist in your facility? Can they go from the beginning of their journey to the end of it without harassment? Can they use a restroom? Is there a restroom available on every floor? Do you have one that's gender neutral? Do you have one that's not just the bathroom for changing babies and pooping? Like, do you have things that are available for people to use your facilities from beginning to end? Facility safety and structural safety, like walking through physically from one end of your building to the other, can people navigate it safely and effectively without having harassment or any like triggers of like, there's no need for you to call me ma'am for the rest of my life. It's okay. Just call me Lindsay. Creating your space. So again, using gender neutral sign, using gender neutral restrooms. Creating signage that says if you've been harassed, this is the policy under which you can get accountability, you can access services or support. Making sure that there's posted harassment policies. We don't harass people in the bathrooms. We allow people to just use the restrooms here. We don't, having all of those harassment policies more regularly available and readily available in your spaces will help people to hold people accountable and for people to know that harassment is taken seriously here. Training your staff. It doesn't matter if you're trained and you're doing the best work in the nation if they can't walk from reception to your office without getting harassed. You have to be trained from beginning to end. It cannot be from one person. It can't be the top doing the great work because VA central office is doing a great job. VA on the ground is doing an awful job. When it comes to certain facilities, if I can't navigate it from one place to the other to go to the doctor, it doesn't matter. I've lost trust in all VA. So training your staff from beginning to end, top to bottom, matters so much because if they can't get to you, it's not going to matter how good you are. I also say redesign your forms. Looking at your intake forms, do they offer people the opportunity to say, I don't use Miss Ma'am, Mr. Mix or anything? Does it allow people to opt to say MX now? Does it allow people to opt to add their pronouns to their gender identity? Do all of your forms ask about military sexual trauma? Understanding that when people fill out these forms, that it triggers resources and services that are tailored to their experiences that then go to them. So to redesigning those forms with the community in mind and the community involved. So not just saying, I think this is what needs to happen. It's actually, hey, trans vets, we want to serve you better. How can we do that? Can you look at my form? Is it actually helpful? So redesigning those forms, because that's another variation of anybody navigating your services. A form can be the reason why somebody just says, yeah, this is garbage, I'm out. When you do collect information, collect and analyze that data. So people are really reluctant to ask about sexual orientation and gender identity in a way that's helpful because people are don't ask, don't tell, or people are really reluctant to work with LGBTQ folks. But at the end of the day, we need this information for data and trends, understanding what's happened to our community. We don't even know how many LGBTQ veterans there are in the country. We just estimate by a number that was built in 1999. I wasn't even out yet. I wasn't even queer or trans yet. I wasn't even in the military yet. That number is so old and nobody has data because VA just started collecting it in January of 2023. Collect that information and when you do, use it. And then the last thing is like LGBTQ outreach. How are you actually bringing people into your organization? Are you building relationships with organizations, with community grassroots or like people? How are you building your outreach services to make sure that you're actually reaching those folks and not just like putting out a wide net and expecting that you're going to get anything different than what you always get? I have 45, 46, 47 slides that explain all about this, but really it's all about getting creative, getting innovative, and involving the community in the stuff that you're doing.
Also listening to the veteran themselves, because guess what? They're gonna be the best person to ask this information and give you feedback. Because at the end of the day, that's who you're serving.
Yeah, I've just like taken a look at some of the slides, and absolutely setting the tone, like asking questions, right? Accepting silence, like understanding that sometimes people just don't want to disclose, having a respectful environment where you're using inclusive language, right? And just having a validating and affirming experience. And I really appreciate you, Lindsay, sharing just the slides that you use to educate and advocate for folks, because designing a supportive services for a community, it takes thoughtful consideration, right? And it's about putting on a different lens, right, of experience, because sometimes folks are really like it's black or white, and there's just a lot of gray space that if we just accept that gray space and we can move in between, we all coexist together, right? Like it's not, you know, so yeah, I'm not even gonna go there. I've got folks who would fight me tooth and nail, right? But at the end of the day, it's a human experience, and I think it's really important both here at the Legion and all other VSOs, and for just like DoD, everybody. Let's just say everybody collectively who's involved in this environment, in this space, just if you don't know, ask questions, right? Like, or seek out the services and training. It's easier said than done, I'm sure. I know both of you have, been on the receiving end where I'm sure you've gotten the rebuttals of, well, this or that, right? And I'd love to know what both of your messages would be to folks who are still very apprehensive or not really sure how to embrace the community. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and like party messages for folks that are still like in that black and white space, who don't know how to move in between the gray yet, and just shine a light on it. That's what we're here to do today. So
I would definitely say the biggest thing right now is that the image of a veteran is no longer that cis white old man with the hat. It's no longer that. We're all shapes, sizes, different colors. It says changes, and the organizations that are flourishing and getting the more resources and getting the help for the veterans are those that are embracing this change, where a veteran picture isn't just one box anymore. Our intersections are way huge, and everything combined are succeeding, and those that aren't are kind of, you can see them, they're falling to the backside of everything. And it's something to say that the VA itself too is national VA is figuring it out, but the VAs on the ground aren't. Some of them aren't, and you can definitely tell which ones are more excited for veterans to go to where, and the ones that aren't, they're losing people.
So I used to, like I said, I used to run a Legion post, and it was a really interesting experience for me, because it was the first time that we got involved in the Legion when I was working with a SBA chapter. We needed money for t-shirts. And we were doing a tailgate, and we didn't have $800 to buy t-shirts for everybody, but we sure wanted to. And we wanted to do a tailgate, and it was going to be all of the University of Washington campuses go to the Salute to Service game, and it didn't exist before. So like we were building this from like building the rocket in the sky, and we needed t-shirts. So somebody was like, you got to go and ask the American Legion. And I was like, well, shit, excuse my language. I had no idea what to expect. I was 2015 or 16. So it was like, I was 23 years old, I was 28 years old or something like that. It's like, had no engagement with the Legion before that. And so I had no idea what to expect. I walked in, and I'll tell you, from the outside looking in, just a bunch of grumpy old men wearing funky hats. And I had it like, that was my experience. That's what I thought it was. And then I got to know them, and I had to present in front of them and tell them why we wanted money for t-shirts. And they were like, I think that's a good idea, and I think we'd like to be there. there were some folks there that were University of Washington alumni. And it was like this really cool opportunity to build generational bridges, to create like a partnership. I ended up like, and somehow in 6 months they had me roped into freaking post commander, and all of a sudden I liked it, you know, like
I understand.
and it's like I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But one of the things that I valued most was that I thought, and you know, when you stripped everything away, at the same time we were fighting for what I thought was the moral right, that like we were out there to show our communities that we had fought for our country, and now we want to fight for our communities and build the America that we believed in. And mind you, there were in the last few years some rifts have happened, and that's really kind of a like sad reality of what has happened. But I also know, like, I still believe that there's a morality in there, and I still believe that we are just one human, like trying to figure out how to be better. And I'm autistic, so I don't have the same connections to data in the ways of like emotional, right? But like when I look at this from a health equity lens, and I look at this from like, why is our community dying faster? Why is our community dying by suicide at a greater rate? Why is our community being raped or sexually assaulted? I'm not here to say like anybody deserves special services. What I'm here to say is that the data says this. We need a solution, whatever it is. I don't care if you like these people or not. The data says this, and we, as a community, we value ingenuity, we value the moral right, and we value doing the right thing. And right now, that says that people need access to the healthcare that they need. We've fought for rights that are now no longer, whether we believe in them or not, no longer accessible to us. I don't care if you believe in that you need it. It's still a right that we fought for in uniform, and we are now fighting on our own terms to do the same thing and fight for the same community. And there's been such a deep rift of like us versus them. But when we stripped the uniform and all of our pieces of ourselves and put that uniform on, we came back with injuries, with things that we need to deal with and things that we need to navigate. And we were a community then, we need to be a community today. And it's going to be hard, because it's hard to be in a community. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And it's going to be hard to learn about others. It is going to be hard to challenge your own understanding and to think that you might have been wrong at some point. But to listen to the stories of who we are will change your mind and will change your whole worldview. Sit down with somebody, have a conversation with a transgender veteran. I'm just like you. I have a wife. I lost a child. We have a home. I do building projects on my weekends. I have a cat, a dog. Like, I'm normal. Like, I'm just a regular person. Sit down and have a cup of coffee and learn about us. And at the end of the day, like, if you still hate us after knowing more of us, I have questions about what's going on with you.
Very well said. Go ahead, Rebekka.
I was gonna say, I totally agree. I mean, that's the biggest thing is come down and sit with us, talk with us. We're all veterans at the end of the day. And that's the one thing I hate about the past community. And Tava was a big part of this, was the gatekeeping. And I'm so grateful that now that we are all moving out of this gatekeeping era and to where we're actually supporting each other, because at the end of the day, we all served our country. We all had each other's back when we were across seas in different countries fighting for this beautiful country. Why aren't we doing the same thing when we're here on our own turf? It doesn't make sense.
Well, I don't know how to say it better than both of you. I don't know if I'm actually going to try. I'm going to say this to everyone who is listening, who has continued to listen through this series about military sexual trauma. I hope that you have a greater understanding of the LGBTQ plus community. And I hope that your heart is open. I hope that you are on I would say this. Respect is incredibly important. I think that was a big value for many of us, regardless of whatever branch of service. And I think respecting each other as human beings first and always is going to be the best medicine, right? despite what we know about health disparities. I'm with Lindsay on this one. I'm a public health nerd. I know that, the LGBTQ plus community, our veterans, are at a disproportionate risk for suicide and other poor health outcomes. Military sexual trauma included, other barriers for accessing services and lack of social support. And for sexual and gender minority veterans that have faced stigma and discrimination, we know that this affects your health. It's important that you realize that there are people out there who love and accept you and will respect you. And that for those of us that are all, allies and continuing to understand this changing community and things that are happening, I hope that those that are out there can open their hearts to that and see that we're all human at the end of the day. And I want to thank both Lindsay and Rebekka for being on here and sharing your stories. They're both incredibly powerful. And I hope that they inspire others to be the best versions of themselves today, tomorrow, and in the future.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you both so much for being a part of the series. We will have links to resources we've already discussed in our show notes, but are there any other resources you want to share before we wrap things up?
So I'm going to shamelessly represent the organization that I love so much. If you are in need of support or just want to connect to a really dope community, Minority Vets is a really cool organization that we love so much, minorityvets.org. You can learn more about the programs and policy and all of the weird stuff that we're getting into. Also follow us on social. If you are a survivor, if you are going back to VA or considering going back to VA for support services, find your MST coordinator, find your LGBTQ coordinator, find your women coordinator, find any coordinator that you can. If you are nervous or concerned about your safety, connect with the patient advocate in advance of going to your service or to your appointments. But be proactive and connect with all of those resources that are available to you. And if you are in need of a discharge upgrade, you can access through IVA's got one set up right now, Modern Military. Most of your legal services clinics will also offer a discharge upgrades. So discharge upgrades, access those services, and make sure you connect to coordinators.
I'm gonna plug Tava for a minute. Transveran.org. We also have a 24/7 hotline just in case any transgender veteran needs any support or help. Please reach out to us. It's on our website. All the board members board officers have the phone number. I answer at 3:00 in the morning, Alaska time, all the time. So please call us. We want to just support veterans in general. Even if you're not a trans veteran, we would love to support you and get you the resources you need.
I got two more. Sorry. If you are in need of mental health support, call 988. Make sure that you do not engage in crisis alone. And I lost the other one that the Trevor Project. If you are not feeling like you can access VA or social services through 988, contact the Trevor Project if you're in need of mental health support.
Perfect. Well, Alphas, you heard it here first. You can find the rest of this special series and all 4 seasons of the Tango Alpha Lima podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you are consuming your podcasts. Subscribe on your favorite platform so you don't miss a single episode. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter and send us feedback at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Tango Alpha Lima special series. We understand that this content can be triggering. Please know that you are not alone, and if you are in crisis or in need of support, you don't have to be enrolled in VA to connect to the Veterans Crisis Line. Dial 988, then press 1 for 24/7 confidential crisis support.